On cold, rainy days like this one, when the strong wind stirs the sea, sunken treasures tend to resurface. It usually consists of sea glass or an aggressive crab. But sometimes, the tides push to shore other kinds of uninvited guests. After all, there are strange creatures lurking in the water. Hello there, I'm Isabel, and today I'm making a mermaid. Let's get started, shall we? I'll begin by making a sketch so I have a rough idea of what the mermaid should look like. I'd like for her to have a youthful look, yet still have a menacing appearance. Like, is she a friend or a foe? Maybe she's a mermaid ghost, or some kind of cursed sea spirit who was locked away deep in the depths of the ocean. I'm quite happy with the finished sketch, but I might change her top and her hair design, as I'm not completely sold on it yet. I suppose I'll figure it out as I get there, so let's start sculpting. I started with a ball of aluminum foil, then covered it in Sculpey Ultralight since I want the head to be as light as possible. Then baked it so I would have a solid base to work off of. I'm not sure if I mentioned this before, but I really dislike working with colored clay, and overall I've just never had a good time working with it. But I'm trying really hard to suck it up and not be a colored clay hater, because having a finished piece that is already close to the color you want to paint it makes the whole process a lot faster and easier. So I figured I would try again with this project. I tried my best to sculpt the facial features, but the clay was so soft that I just kept crushing one part of the face as I was working on the other. After 2 hours of re-sculpting the face, I had enough and took all the clay off and switched to Sculpey Medium Blend. And let's be honest, that was not my best work. So let's try this again. I drew Gaia lines in the clay and added the pre-baked eyeballs. Then added a fat clay banana to form the jaw and some smaller bananas for the eyebrows. I'll blend all that clay so it's nice and smooth, then bake it to save my progress. Once it had cooled down, I started shaping the eyelids by adding tiny coils of clay and blending those in. The goal at this stage is just to slowly add the clay to build up the facial features. I'll try to make her face as symmetrical as I can, and I'll also make sure her face looks nice not only from the front, but also in profile or in 3/4 view. You know, make sure she looks good from every angle. Then I'll add more clay on the tip of her nose, shape it with my tool, and poke 2 holes to make the nostrils. I'll sculpt her smile and fiddle with the shape until it looks mischievous enough for me. I'll add the ears and blend the clay into the face. Then I baked it again and sanded the face to smooth out the imperfections. Even though it was frustrating, I'm glad I started over. I think this second attempt looks a lot better than the first one, don't you think? Now, let's work on the body. I started with a wire armature that I'll bend and twist to match the pose in my sketch. Then I bulk up the armature with foil. Off camera, I drill 2 holes in the base to hold up the armature. I'll start by covering it with a first layer of clay and bake it so I have a solid surface to work off of. Then I'll sand it real quick to get rid of the big lumps and bumps. I covered her tail in a second layer of clay, then went over all the surface with the grippy part of my sculpting tool to make her scales. I like to think that this mermaid is a little menace and she likes to attack and destroy ships or fight with other sea monsters. So it would only make sense that she would be covered in battle scars. I would also like to add that my standard for good character design are based on what my 12-year-old self would think is cool. And 12-year-old Isabel thinks that scars look pretty awesome. It will also help bring out a special visual effect, but you'll have to stick to the end of the video to see what I mean. Next, I made these paper templates for her fins, so I'll be able to work on those while she bakes in the oven. I'll make the fins out of flexible air-dry clay. It's a pretty neat clay, and it smells a lot like white glue for some reason. I did test the clay beforehand to see if it worked, and I'm happy to report that it's not a scam. It's pretty flexible once dry and doesn't break off, which is exactly what I needed. I pressed the clay in a flower petal silicone mold, then cut around the paper template to match my desired fin shape. I also tore a bit of the ends off and made the rest of the fins in the exact same way. I'll set them aside to dry and start working on the torso. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm not sure what to do with her top yet, so I'm just gonna sculpt her breast and torso for now, and I'll figure it out later. Because procrastinating until you absolutely cannot put it off anymore is the best way to force an artistic decision. Here is something you don't have to procrastinate on, which is giving this video a like, or subscribing to the channel. Wasn't that a good segue? That was a good segue. Once that was done, I baked the clay again to save my progress. Then I sanded it again. I also realized I forgot to add her gills, so I'll add that now. I added clay on the armature to make her arms, then refined the shape and smoothed it all out with a bit of rubbing alcohol. Baked that again to save my progress and sanded it as well. Off camera, I pre-baked these tiny little fingers, then inserted each one in the palm and blended the clay with my tool. It's my first time sculpting a hand using this method, and it works so well. I think this is by far the prettiest hand I've ever sculpted, so I totally recommend this method. I know I might be going overboard with the amount of time I've baked my mermaid, but I find it so much easier to work on each part separately than baking the clay to save my progress. I think that if I were to try to work on everything at once, I would just get overwhelmed, so I try not to do that. Now, this will be her last time in the oven, and when she had cooled down, I superglued her fins to her tail. I gotta say, I'm very impressed by that flexible clay, and will definitely be using it again in future projects. Now, on to painting. I'll paint her base color on. I didn't film this, but I used a sponge to make the gradients on her fin. I also decided it was time to stop procrastinating on her top and just do something. So I did. And it's good enough for 12-year-old Isabel. I also used the mold again to add texture. I'm just realizing this now, but I made it into a heart shape. Aww. For the eyes, I started with a coat of navy blue, then painted her irises in gold, then drew a simple line for her pupils. I painted her gills in navy blue, and gave her a little manicure. Once her top was dry, I painted it blue like basically everything else. I find it a bit ironic that I made her blue when it's my least favorite color, but to be fair, it was the color that worked the best for her design. I found this highlighter powder in my makeup drawer. I mean, look at how magical that looks. C'est tellement cute. So of course, I brushed some of it on her fins. I should have done this at the very end, since now there's glitter all over her and my table now. And now, I'll move on to her hair. I'm using acrylic yarn that I brushed and straightened into hair wefts. I was still unsure of the design, but I couldn't think of anything better, so here goes nothing. I glued hair wefts all around her head until she looked like she just woke up with a terrible bedhead. Oh dear. When the glue was dried, I gave her a much needed trim and put her hair back. Then I covered her hair with a generous amount of acrylic modeling paste since I didn't have any hair gel. It actually works super well. That hair is not going anywhere. I also colored her hair with watered down paint. Next time though, I'm gonna color the hair before gluing it to the head. And at last, added her shackles that I made from an old chain and craft foam. And that's it. Let's see the final result. So, what do you think? The glow-in-the-dark paint really takes it from suspicious mermaid to dangerous sea monster, and I love it. I don't think I would like to encounter her the next time I go swimming, but lucky for us, creatures that live in the water usually stay in the water. On that note, thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.